Okay, hi. We'll start over. And so now I'll be faster because I've already said everything once, and so I can now simplify what I was saying. What you guys were seeing on the screen as I was talking animatedly is my beautiful Shop Vita collection. I have blouses and scarves that are available on my Shop Vita site, and the link is down in the description of my YouTube video. All of these are just full of beautiful, vibrant color. The scarves are a cashmere silk blend. When I brought my Flight of Fancy scarf, I brought two of them into the local art gallery gift shop this just before Christmas. It was only a few days before Christmas, and I was surprised to find out that they both sold immediately. And so that just shows the beautiful quality of these scarves. You see them and you just have to have one. So what I also have is for my Shop Vita site, which has these beautiful garments. There's a $20 gift card link coupon code in the description of this video. So if you are loving the colors, thinking that maybe you could see it in your wardrobe, make sure you use up that coupon code because I want you to get a good deal. Okay, so we are gonna now start to move over to my work surface, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna talk about your working methods. And as a student of watercolor and as an artist, I'm always going to be a student of watercolor. I've been painting for 20 years, and yet every time I come to my studio, I approach it as a learner. And by taking that attitude of not knowing what I'm doing all the time, not knowing everything, anticipating that I'm going to challenge myself and want to improve, it gives me a little bit of peace when things don't turn out, because I can have that expectation that every brush stroke, every studio session is making me a better painter. But I also want to be deliberate about the time I spend working on a painting. When I approach a new subject to paint, I find that it's almost I almost have to teach myself how to paint it. Whether or not 500 other artists have painted that same scene, for me to paint it, for it to be my style, my approach, I'm going to have to teach myself how it works for me to paint it. So I'm learning not to expect that my first attempt at something is going to be the one that turns out, although sometimes we get that lucky moment where everything comes together and our first painting turns out to be the best one. So what we're going to do now is just move over to my work surface, and I'm going to talk about that working method. And so now I've basically caught up to everything I was saying when you guys couldn't hear me. So I'm going to edit that out of the video in the recording process. Right now, I'm going to switch my camera over to my work surface, and we're going to start to look at some paintings. And I'll keep talking, and I will keep a better eye on the chat so that I don't miss if there is some technical issues happening. So I apologize again for that. Just moving the camera over. I should actually mute it when I move the camera, but then I might forget to turn it back on again, so we don't want to do that. There we go. Okay, so now you can see my work surface, but first, before we start doing any painting, I want to just show you a couple of things. First of all, and then let me just adjust slightly. There we go. First of all, I really like this idea of working out a subject through sketches and studies. So we've had some beautiful full moons in our region, and so this, I'm going to just put my paintbrush there. It gives my camera something to focus on for when I move stuff around. This is just a very simple sketch that I did thinking about our full moon, trying out some colors. It's important, I think, to not just try out how you're going to paint your scene, but also to be thinking about the colors you're going to use. What colors are going to work the best? And so in this one, I was trying out, this is dioxazine violet. I was working with Moon Glow, which is a beautiful granulating pigment from Daniel Smith. And I was working with Sodalite Genuine, which is also granulating. So I got some amazing texture. Moving in closer so you can see it. And I can't really hold it still enough so that it focuses properly. So I got some amazing texture there, and that was so much fun. And then I also got to use the sharp end of one of my paintbrushes, and I actually scraped right into my paper to get these little texture lines. So that was pretty fun. And it was just getting me thinking about how do you get that beautiful glowing moon. We don't want to paint using metallic colors or anything. I wanted to do it just with watercolor. And so here was my opportunity to experiment with that and get those contrasts and get that beautiful glow. And then from there, I was able to feel more confident about painting a night scene. And so then I went to try a little sketch of, this one is again of a scene in my region. And I just used a scrap of paper. I don't throw anything away. I love using scraps over and over again. Both sides, filling it up with paint, just making sure I've gotten my money's worth out of my paper. And actually this little sketch is one of those where the magic did show up. And I absolutely love everything about this sketch. I think I might have to frame it. But, you know, that I think sometimes that freshness and that feeling that we love comes because I approach this as a sketch. It's a small piece of paper. I have nothing to lose. I'm going to just try some dramatic colors. This is a Paraline green from Daniel Smith, and it's an amazing, rich, deep green. And then I was working with, again, some beautiful blues, ultramarine, indigo, the Sodalite Genuine, and getting that full moon sense. And then from there, I wanted to develop it into a larger painting. And so then I had to pull out a bigger sheet of paper and commit a little more to trying something that was going to turn out. So I've gone from a very simple scene, you know, just basically two pieces, sky and land, and then working out different ideas and trying out colors. And then I've gone to trying to work it into a scene with a bit more depth. This is supposed to be like a ridge and a little ravine with a little bit of ice down here, a little creek at the bottom. And so, and then how do I place the trees and where do I stop? So from there, then I wanted to make that into a full painting. And this is where I'm hoping we'll have room for you guys to see most of it. Yeah, you can see most of it here. So here I have a larger sheet of paper that I wanted to do the exact, you know, the same scene, only bigger. And then of course, if you're doing something bigger, then you generally want to throw in more detail, or those little details that seem so quick and easy in a smaller painting suddenly start to become a little more difficult as they're more visible in a larger scene. This one I'm not completely happy with, and I can show you why. One thing that kind of fell apart on this one was I really like the way I painted the trees down here, but they don't really match the trees up here. So I think I'd like to do it again, working with trees with this shape more than with this shape. And I'm always changing how I paint different things. My way of painting evergreen trees has changed over the years and has developed. This to me has a little more of a calligraphy kind of look, and I really like that. So I'd like to use that, you know, throughout my painting and not just have two very different styles of trees. The other thing that bothers me about this painting is this area right here. And in my little sketch, it's just kind of a white space and there's nothing happening there. But I felt like I needed to add more detail in this area. And that was kind of a mistake because even if this area needed more detail, I hadn't planned it in that original sketch. And so now here I am with working without the benefit of testing out an idea. So I didn't test out this idea. I tried it on my big sheet of paper and I kind of messed up. So now this whole painting is kind of on hold. I can either keep painting and turn this into a study where I'm trying to work out ideas and paint this whole scene again, which I think is what I'll do. Again, not wanting to waste paper, and as a learner, I'm going to just keep painting and say, I'm going to make this my experimentation ground now, and then the next painting will be the one where I can take all these ideas and bring them all together. And now I have 3 different scenes that all fit together to teach me something about painting a night scene, painting a full moon, and then also now adding in that whole idea of painting this little ravine. So it's a process, and I'd have to give it time if I want it to work out. And the cool thing is, whether or not this big one turns out, I still have this little guy that I like very much. So that's a little bonus. Okay, now I'm taking a look at your comments very quickly. Oh, I do have a question about my moon. Did I lift out the moon in the photo, or how did I achieve that? What I did with my moon was, and I can probably show you, I have a scrap of paper here. It's digressing from what we had planned to do, but here, I have a piece, here's a dirty piece of scrap paper, so I'll show you right here. What I did with my moon, and I don't have my indigo here, so I'll just have to pick a different color. You know what's really pretty for dark blue is the ultramarine turquoise and the dioxazine violet. They make a pretty color together. That could work for a night sky. Okay, so what I did with my moon, and I feel like my brush isn't going to cooperate today, but we'll just give it a try, is I just painted in that circle, and you can see I'm painting it a little bigger than I want it to be, because then I can go in and tighten it up very carefully. But then then I bled out from the sides, letting that color flow. And notice it's getting very light now as I dampen it. And then I'm very careful to tidy up my circle. And if you're not confident that you can draw a good circle, you can very lightly sketch one. I don't know, I'm just an obstinate kind of person who likes to freehand everything. Then I took, you know, more beautiful pigment, more of that violet, more of that turquoise, maybe a little bit. There's some moon glow in my palette that I can add. And I started to drop that in. And then I wanted some softness, that feeling of clouds going over the moon. So that's just a matter of letting some of that color bleed in using a damp brush. And some of that color can flow in. And that also is a really good way to hide if your circle isn't perfectly round. And then with a damp brush, you also want to control those shadows. And so I use that damp brush to suck up when too much color comes on. Then I can use my brush to lift that color and keep my moon from getting too dark. And I just kind of went back and forth like little clouds kind of scudding across. And you can see my moon has a real glow to it, just even in that one layer. Although from here, once this has dried, then I can go in with another layer of dark color and tighten up those the lines around the moon, make a little more contrast between the edge of the moon and the sky, which is what I did on this one. You can see I went over this here. You can see all kinds of color where the blue bled into the moon. I blotted it so it wasn't too dark, and then once it was dry, I went in and gave it that outline again. So that kind of gives you an idea of how I did that. And again, I would probably just want to keep an eye on this as long as it was drying, and then use my damp brush to lift out color if it started to get too dark again, and just keep blotting lightly. You can use your paper towel, but you have less control than your brush. You can use just the point of your brush to lift and smooth out some of that color a little bit. So that kind of gives you an idea. And look at all the pretty things that are happening with just the mixture of water and pigment. There's little blooms that are happening here on the paper, and I think I can bring it in a little closer for you to see. And all those blooms give beautiful texture. So it's kind of fun. It's a scary thing to paint a moon because it's such a round object, and we think, oh, I can't paint a circle that round and perfect. I'm going to mess up. But it's actually not as hard as you would think it was. Just go for it and give it a try. Okay, so that was, I'm going to show you one more thing, and that's another process of sketching and how sketching affects my floral painting. And I think the other thing we do is often as painters, we start out really needing to learn our techniques. And so you guys, if you're just beginning to paint, you're going to be fighting for control. Things you want your paint to do what you want it to do. You don't always know what to expect when you start putting a lot of water and pigment on. And so you're really fighting for control when you're learning how to paint and how to use the techniques in watercolor. So I think that most watercolor artists, we start out painting fairly realistic, and that's why how I'm explaining my sunflower here. This is a demo I've done. I have a tutorial on it on YouTube. And I also have taught it as a local class many times. So I've painted this sunflower in this exact layout many times. But then how I paint this sunflower affects how I paint other sunflowers. And as I've developed and gotten very familiar with this type of flower, it changes the way I paint it. And so here I have one, and this one's actually not really finished. I was trying out some different ideas. I was trying out negative painting for a white flower, and I like the little depths I've got over there. I was trying out kind of some lilac-y shapes, and you know, they're not too bad. And then I was trying out some negative painting for this sunflower, trying out some different colors for the center. And I like this painting. I've hung on to this painting for a long time. I'm not super happy with the composition. This flower is just so dead center that I think if I cropped it, it would be better, but I like this corner, so I don't want to cut that off. I like this side, so I don't want to cut that off. So I've just kind of hung on to this painting for a long time. But you know, it's a chance to experiment and try out some different ideas. And then from there, I've gotten extremely loose with my sunflowers, and these I love because there's huge amounts of rich, vibrant pigment. There's almost a rainbow in the center of this flower with the red. Actually, there is. I can see red, orange, yellow, green, and blue, and violet, all in the center of this flower. And those things make me so happy. And you can see a big difference between how I painted this one and how I painted this one. And we change, we evolve, and as we become more familiar with a subject, we get bolder in how we paint it. And so I think that's a really good argument for why you want to paint the same subject more than once. We want to develop it repeatedly. And as we develop, you know, what happened here is I'm also seeing my sunflowers less in terms of every single individual element, and I'm starting to see them as patterns of light and shape. And so that changes the way I paint my flowers. And I think as artists, we have to learn how to see that way. And so in my lessons, in my online courses, I often teach this working method where we don't expect to have a successful, confident painting our first time. In my Craftsy course on Craftsy, it's called Better Painting with Watercolor Sketches, and it's that idea that we get to know our subject and we paint it in some fun ways, because I don't want to feel like I'm doing homework, but I want to be, you know, having a good time. I want to start out, and I was going to do just a little rose demo for you guys. If I can figure out where I put all my colors. Yeah, I brought my palette in, and yet I still seem to forget the one palette that had the color I was originally using. Oh, here we go, quinacridone coral. And we want to start, especially when we're starting a painting, by seeing the major shapes. So we're starting by looking at maybe a circular shape, and I want to add some yellow to that because that pink's a little bit bland and boring. So I'm going to grab a little cadmium yellow. I love that little whoosh it makes when it hits that wet paper. And so I'm basically painting a little squiggly circle. And so I'm looking for the major shapes. And I think the mistake we often make when we're starting, when we paint, is we know things so well. We know a rose is made up of many, many layers of petals overlapping, and we think, oh, that's so complicated, how am I going to paint it? But if you squint your eyes and look at it just as shapes, you're going to see that it's basically just a circle. And from there, and that's all you need to know in that first layer of your painting. What is the major shape and layout, arrangement? Now we're going to add some, I didn't want to use that. I wanted to use this Cascade Green over here to add a little bit of foliage. And for this, I'm not looking at a reference photo right now. I'm just thinking what looks good. Right now I've just made a little triangle of leaves that frames my flower. And everything's wet and juicy and moist, so it's bleeding together a little bit, which is very soft and pretty. And I'm only using 3 colors at this stage: my quinacridone coral, my cadmium yellow, and my Cascade Green. It's kind of a triad, 3 colors on the color wheel, although in a true triad you might be seeing a blue rather than the green, but that's kind of a blue-green. It's a nice cool tone, so it looks really nice with this beautiful kind of antique rose color. Now over on this side, I've got, because my paper's curling a little bit, I've got a little puddle forming. I might just blot a little edge of that. Usually with my paintings, I give a ½ inch around the sides for framing anyhow. So if there's a little, muddy puddle around the edge, it's not going to matter too much. So I'm going to let this dry, and I've done one in advance for you guys. So that's right here. And it's that same idea. I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit. But we started with that circular shape, and to balance it out, I put another circle over here, another flower, and then I've got that triangle of leaves that kind of balances and frames out my flower. Then from here, I start to think about the details. And again, we want to be, instead of thinking, oh, those roses, they're made up of so many petals and it's very complicated, we always want to simplify, because that's what helps us stay loose. And so with the first layer, we're going to, get those major shapes down. With the second layer, we want to embellish upon that and add a few details. But again, it doesn't need to be complicated. Maybe what I would do is squint at this, at my reference image, which actually I don't have a reference image, so I'm just kind of winging it. But I might squint at it and say, well, I see that the flower petals are so tightly packed in the center of my flower that it's darker there. There's more shadows. So then I start to realize that with the rose, you get kind of pulled into the center because of those beautiful, tightly bunched group of petals. And then we see that they also kind of spiral. So I'm going to paint in a very loose spiral. And I'm going to use the same colors I used before. And I think, no, that's too dark. I'm thinking of using my Cascade Green as my shadow color. So where it's really dark, I might need to use my quinacridone coral mixed with a little bit of Cascade Green. And it makes the coral color a little bit muddy and it's kind of like an antique burgundy almost. It's really pretty. And I think ordinarily we would shy away from combining those two colors, but it's beautiful, so I'm glad I did. Gave it a try. And yeah, it's really pretty. I can create those shapes, and I'm still kind of thinking in terms of circles. I'm thinking in terms of the spiral, and I'm wanting to create a little bit of detail by having some little patches of dark values and some vibrant patches of color that just make my flower look nice and fresh. That mixture of green and coral makes that murky color, which is beautiful. It gives that soft antique look. If you want a brighter, purer color, you're going to not want to mix colors that are a little bit complementary, like a reddish color and a green. So it's in what, and I'm kind of leaning towards trying out that antique rose look today. And then I think as we get farther out from our flower, we also start to see that our shapes grow bigger. So here we were quite tight and quite dark, and then our shapes start to change as we move out. They can get larger again and a little bit looser. And so we're really working in terms of, again, light to dark colors. We started out quite light, made sure our inside of our flower is darker, and we can build that up and darken it even in future layers of color if we wish to. Or we can, I don't want to overstate anything here. I do want to keep this fairly loose and simple, so we don't want to add too much detail. I love touching in beautiful color just like this. So I might create, that petal shape with a damp brush and then drop in a little bit of water or a little bit of color into that moisture to let that bleed, and that creates that pretty fluidity that we're so drawn to in watercolor. I want to do kind of an outer edge of my flower, and then I'm going to let it be and maybe look at my foliage a little bit. Again, this is going to be just a very quick and loose demonstration. I don't think we need to paint every petal exactly as our reference photo shows it to get a beautiful and effective looking rose. And effective, by effective I mean, you know, somebody's going to look at this, they're going to know it's a flower, they're going to expect that it's probably a rose, although they might, you know, want to, they might think, oh, is it a peony or is it a chrysanthemum? And if they want to think that, that's fine by me. You can you can call it whatever flower you think is most pleasing to you. That's the idea with loose painting. What we are drawing people into our painting for is we want them to enjoy the beautiful colors. We want them to feel that texture and you know, just see the beauty of watercolor more than we want to show a precision in how we're depicting something. And it's very addictive just to drop in those little beautiful pockets of color. And I just don't want to stop doing it. Now I already feel like I've gotten too much detail, too many little pieces here and there. And so I could say I'm going to soften some of these areas just to blend them together a little bit more so that my form of my flower is a little bit simpler. And I could build it up using multiple layers and just keep refining it. And it's all in how much time you want to spend and how much detail you want to put into your painting. But I like to keep it fairly loose and just go to where it's just saying what it is and then try to stop without overdoing it. Okay, I'm going to let that part dry. I really do feel like it could use a few more just bold highlights, strong details, but we're not going to worry about that for this in the time that we have today. And I can do the same over here. Here my center of my flower would be a little bit off to the side, and then we might just keep it a little bit simpler because we don't want everybody to look at this flower, we want them to look at this one. This one's just kind of backup singer. And I like putting down that color and then just using a damp brush to spread it out a little bit and let it blend a little bit more naturally. And that's very pretty. And then just keeping things darker in the middle. And then finally just going to our foliage and the same thing. We want to maybe paint one side of one leaf over on this side, touching it up against the rose so that we get a little bit of blending. And sometimes you might want to paint a little bit of the vein on one side of the leaf so that you get enforce that leaf shape even just a little bit more. And maybe I like painting maybe a hint of a vine over, you know, just a little bit here and there. You can even just paint that little outline and then just soften it a little bit with the damp brush. Sometimes it's just fun to teach you guys because I get to kind of scribble with my brush and show you how, you know, that loose, relaxed stroke. And I have done, you know, I've painted these leaf shapes many times, but it doesn't have to be that tight and controlled precision of painting. You can have so much fun with just gestural, relaxed brush strokes. And they just seem so much more painterly. So, and then you can also use your green to change the shape of your rose. Here I had this pink bleeding out, but I kind of feel like it's going to look better if my green, if my flower is just a little bit smaller. So I'm going to bring my green right up to that little edge, and that just changes my flower shape just a little bit, and by painting around it. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. So yeah, ooh, sorry guys. So really it's just in working on studying and simplifying, this is maybe a study that I'd take into a larger painting, but we just, again, starting with those big shapes and then just slowly starting to build up those details. You don't have to be intimidated by a complicated shape or object or scene. I'm just going to take a look at your questions and see what I can do to answer some of them today. And that involves me moving the camera one more time. Okay. You can still hear me, right? Yeah, we're still good. Okay, so just taking a look at your questions. And I just want to remind you again that I have below the video in the description all kinds of information to help you guys out. I have links to the supplies I've used today, as well as links to some courses that continue to talk about this idea of making better paintings through kind of planning and sketching and studying the scene, getting to know it in some fun ways. I don't want to make hard work for you, but fun ways to develop a painting so that you can approach it more confidently. I also have a link to my products on Shop Vita. The other thing I'm going to do is, I know a couple of you have said that the YouTube description doesn't always come up for you, so I'm going to start embedding that information in a post in my blog. So if you go to angelafair.com, you can visit my blog and see the links as well. If you're having trouble there, it'll be easier to find everything, I hope. Okay, few more questions. Let's take a look here. You guys are just chatting up a storm now. I got a whole bunch of stuff to read. Back it up. Velma asks, when I'm painting and in a groove, do I find it hard to stop and let things dry, or do I have several paintings going so I can keep painting? I always have a whole bunch of things going on in my studio. Sometimes, usually 5 or 6 paintings, because I do believe in having that time to let things dry, and not just to let things dry, but to let your mind kind of catch up to what your hand is doing on the paper. I find that when we paint past our mental plan, we tend to make mistakes, or that's when the errors start to happen, like in that landscape scene that I was showing you earlier. So sometimes that works really well to have several paintings on the go. Sometimes I'll get back to something I started and have no idea what my reference inspiration even was, and so I might take it in a completely different direction or flip it over and try something else. Thank goodness paper has 2 sides. Okay, taking a look again. Sorry, just reading, folks. Feel free to ask any more questions while I'm scrolling through. I love the Mind of Watercolour as well, that YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe. Steve Mitchell's a friend of mine, and it was fun collaborating with him on a previous video. His channel has grown big time since then. He's got lots of subscribers and offers lots of video tips, so I encourage you to check him out. There's a few other artists I follow on YouTube as well. And I am working on a new course I'm excited about. It's going to be a tropical themed course. We're going to work on some beach scenes and some tropical flowers. So you can be watching for that to come soon. I'm actually going to head out to the studio right after we wrap up here and work on that. And I think, let's see here. Yeah, painting palm trees is going to be covered in that new course. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions that are needing an answer immediately right now. So I want to just wrap this up by thanking you guys all for coming and joining me online live today. You can watch for the next one next week, and this video will be up for the next week, so you guys can catch it if you missed the live broadcast. I want to encourage you, feel free to email me, ang@angelafair.com, if you have questions. I do not offer painting critiques by email, but if you are enrolled in one of my online classes at learn.angelafair.com, the student galleries are great places to post your work, to get my critiques, suggestions from other students. They're really great places. That's one thing I love about my online classes, is that the learning continues even after the course is finished in the student galleries. So I encourage you to check those out. And again, if you are struggling with painting a certain type of subject and just aren't really figuring out how to break through and get it down to the major elements and get everything to work together, I really encourage you to try one of my online classes. Better Paintings with Watercolor Sketches, my Craftsy course. There's a link for it for half price in the video description. And there's 2 other courses I list that are 2 of my favorite courses that I've taught because of how practical they are at teaching you how to really get deeper than just painting what you see on the surface of your reference photo, and really start to apply your own artistic personal expression to it. So I encourage you to check those out. And I just want to thank you again for joining me. You guys are great. You're very supportive. You're very patient when my sound isn't working right, and I appreciate that. And I hope you guys all have a great week. And so now I'm going to sign right off. See you later.